code walkthrough for my crypto tracking website, which I will be explaining in detail in this video. And basically, my motivation for this website is to like help beginner traders um, make their first step onto to understanding crypto prices, the crypto candlestick charts, like stock prices. So I thought this is a very accessible tool and it can help people that are just starting to dabble into crypto trading. So I did an HTML, CSS, and JavaScript website, and I'll be explaining how I developed it. Um, First of all, this is my HTML. I'm using just standard um, HTML structure. Here I link my CSS file. I import Plotly JS for my candlestick charts, which I'll be showing you later. And I link to my JavaScript file. Um, Here I have an unordered list just to list some cryptocurrencies and do a bit of like styling, like in the sense of explaining what my website does, track the performance of any cryptocurrency from a start date to an end date. And um, very important here, I create the input boxes for the crypto symbol, for the start date and the end date. And I create um, the button, which is linked to this is a JavaScript function, which I'll be showing you later. And well, the name of the button is show chart. And this div, which is gonna be the container, which includes the chart, um, which comes from the JavaScript code. But it's very important that I create this div so I can show that. Now moving on to CSS. This is just very standard styling. I don't think there's anything out of the ordinary. I use the flex direction to achieve this like vertical setup. Here are the input boxes and just standard styling. Um, I create this hover animation for the buttons and the list, which I thought I just added a bit of styling and more on the aesthetic side. Again, I don't think there's anything out of the ordinary for my CSS. So it's in my GitHub, it's commented. So I'll move on to the JavaScript. For my JavaScript code, what my JavaScript code is, I created two functions. My first function is the fetch data, which retrieves the cryptocurrency data from the API I used, which I used the Alpaca Data Markets API, and it's specially made for cryptocurrency. And then my second function is my plot chart function, which uses the retrieved data to create a candlestick chart. So my fetch data function has three inputs, which are the symbol, the start date, and the end date. And these are inputted by the user. And well, as shown in the HTML, they're gonna come from this three input boxes. And then here I define the time frame. It's gonna be 1 day. And then what I do here is I have the URL of the endpoints in the Alpaca API. However, I have to indicate like where should like my website retrieve the data from. So here I'm gonna include this symbol here, the time frame, which is already defined in this constant, and then the start date and end date. That's just the structure that is given in the documentation from the Alpaca API. And then when the user inputs this data, it's gonna point to a unique endpoint. And then here, this is just the Alpaca API documentation. This is how they explained how to retrieve, like to fetch, to do the fetch request. I basically copy pasted it. And then here, I also include that here in the fetch. They use JSON data to like they parse the response from the JSON data, and then they extract the data bars for the specified symbol. So here I'm just fetching the data from these two, like from this constant, and then I'm, instead of writing down the URL again and this method again, I simply place them here. However, and to avoid any errors, I included this in a try catch statement. So, um, if there's any errors that occur during fetch or data processing, I'm just gonna catch the error. And the result I'm gonna get is this rows uh, array, which is gonna include the date, the date. Um, However, the API documentation indicates that I have to change it from the date structure that they have into an ISO date string, which I do, and then I get the closing price, the high price, the low price, and the open price, which I'll later show in my plotting once I finish the explanation. Um, so yeah, I get this data and I store it. Um, Now I move on. Oh, now this is from the Plotly JavaScript. Um, I realized that they use this database, but I'm not using that database. I'm using the Alpaca API's database. So I still implement the unpack rows function, so I'm able to get the close, high, low, open value um, in the where I want it to be. So simply, I just like combine both the Plotly and the API to work hand by hand. Um, so the map function, what it basically does is it iterates over each of these rows object, um, and it can show the array in plotly.js. And for each row, it returns the value of the specified key. Um, Now my second function is going to be the plot chart, which is going to use the data that is fetched from the fetch data function to create the plotting. So here I define my constants, which are going to get the it's going to get the values that are inputted in the HTML input boxes. And here I do a trim just to avoid typos. Like for example, if someone writes like uh, USD um, and Bitcoin, but they like add a spacebar at the end. I'm just making sure that I don't have that typo. And I have the start date and the end date input. And here I just included some alerts just to make sure, just to like uh, make sure that the user, which we're supposing it's a beginner um, trader, maybe does a mistake and doesn't include the right crypto symbol. So maybe if the symbol is not entered, um, with this if statement, I just say the website says the symbol's not entered. And then if they don't include a start or end date missing, please enter both and start and end dates before I do the fetch data. So here I use the await operator to fetch the data when the user inputs the values. And again, another alert just in case the data that was specified, for example, if the end date goes before that the start date, there's not going to be any data found. The fetch data is not going to work. The URL is not going to point to any data. So again, the website will show an alert saying no data found for the specified symbol. Here um, this is just comes from the Plotly documentation. Um, here, the, it's applying the unpack um, mentioned before. Here, um, I'm just following the documentation, but I changed this to a green for increasing candles instead of black. I thought it will give the user a bigger insight if a stock is going up or down. Um, and I'm following Plotly um, documentation for my graph. However, I believe, for example, here the Plotly has a drag mode, which I didn't want to be implemented because using the I'm just already specifying the time frame, so I don't need to use the drag mode. So I simply make the range slider false. Like I make the boolean operator be false, so the range slider doesn't exist. So I disable the range slider as it is already specified in input. So again, I'm just using my knowledge to kind of like interplay between the Plotly and the Alpaca API, but make sure to come up with an app which has the best performance for the user. And finally, I apply the Plotly candlestick chart in the my div in the HTML and using the data and layout variables that come from all of this um, plot chart function, which gives this two outputs, which is data layout, and I link it to the my div from the HTML container. And finally, I'll just show how this would look in the website. So here I'm gonna choose, okay, there's Ethereum. I'll just use Bitcoin and the USD, and I'll go a few years back. The database I'm choosing has 7 years of data, so I'm using, I don't know, I'll probably go here, and then you can clearly see the outcome. It fetches the data from, in this case, February of 2021 until July of 2024, and it fetches the data and then uses the Plotly to graph it. And here we can see the open, the high, the low, and the close data points that come from the Alpaca API, and they're used in a candlestick chart, which is extremely useful for a beginner trader. Again, I'll just use maybe a smaller time frame. Go to here to here, and then the candlestick chart can be more clearly seen here. You have the open, um, low, and the high and close values, and you can see if it's red, the price is going down, and if it's green, the price is going up. So that would be it.